Thank you all for joining tonight for this new webinar, Gardening for Fireflies. I appreciate you all joining for this. I like to sometimes go down the rabbit hole and do a lot of research on new things, and um, you never know where it takes you. Sometimes it's fun and it becomes really informative and great, and other times go down the rabbit hole and I'm like, yeah, this wasn't as exciting as I thought it'd be. But both times I learned something, and that's why you're here. You're here to learn stuff. So this time we're going to talk about fireflies. We're going to learn a little bit about their biology, what they are, how they function. How do they make that neat little light with their booties? Lifestyle habits, and then how do we conserve them and help bring them back in suburbia, since that is a rather large problem. So let's just jump right in. So, did you know? And we'll just give some generalized firefly facts. Most of us are going to recognize these guys as North American bugs. When you were a kid, you were probably out there in the backyard in the summertime, and you were running around, and you were catching them and putting them in jars like this. And it was just like a rite of passage for kids as they were growing up. I did it myself, and I took my own children outside and we collected fireflies in a jar similar to that. And then we would just let them go afterwards, maybe keep a couple so they could be in the jar next to their bed. But it was something that really sticks in your memory, right? Something that, you remember them, thousands of them in the backyard or in the woods, depending on if you grew up in suburbia, or, maybe you did grow up in the city and you didn't see very many. But if you grew up on a farm, they were everywhere. And it was really just neat and just a really cherished part of childhood. But as we've grown into more suburban areas, we have much more manicured lawns. We get a lot of calls at Extension about where are all the butterflies? Where are all the fireflies? Where are all the insects? Seems like the only ones left are mosquitoes and roaches, of which nobody wants those. They want the good ones like these. And so it's kind of a head scratcher for most people, because they don't know all the puzzle pieces as to why these insects are not as predominant as they once were. So you'll learn a little bit about that today. But just for practical purposes, let's give you some factoids about them. So they're not flies. Some of you may already know that, but they're actually beetles, and they belong in the order Coleoptera. So now that I've mentioned their beetles, you can probably look at them and you can tell by their eyes, maybe the elytra, which is that covering over their wings on their back. Now maybe it's more obvious, but yeah, they're beetles. They're not flies. And there are three main groups of fireflies. That's going to be the Photinus, the Pyrocom I'm going to mess this one up. Pyrocomena, and the Photurus. So those are the three main groups of fireflies that you're going to find, the genus fireflies here. They're going to be over 150 species of them in North America alone. You can see that map down there in the bottom of the slide. So that's going to be where you would find fireflies, and they're going to be in more temperate areas and some tropical, but definitely the higher numbers of species are going to be in more temperate locations. So there are more than 2,000 species of fireflies around the world. That's a lot. And you'll see what some of them look like biology wise. And so some things you'd be like, that doesn't look like a firefly I'm used to, but it is. And there's going to be 170 species in the US and Canada combined. So which actually I see that's a duplicate there. So somewhere between 150 and 170. The interesting thing, and probably the most interesting thing, and this is why I know I probably killed a few too many fireflies growing up as a kid because I would pull their back end off and I would put that around my neck and I would have a glowing necklace. I'm sure many of you that are out there are probably raising your hand saying, yeah, I think I did the same thing. Don't feel too guilty. Live and learn. But that bioluminescent stuff, for lack of a better word, that is a chemical reaction that occurs in their abdomen. And it's a very, very efficient process because nearly 100% of that energy, that glow, is emitted as light, not heat. So I'm sure many of you are aware we had to switch over from incandescent bulbs to LED bulbs, and that's because they are more efficient with light and they don't put off all of that heat. And so fireflies are basically the same way. They have a very efficient chemical reaction and it puts it off as light. So most fireflies, and that's going to be in their adult form, are going to produce light. But there are some in their adult form that do not. And they're going to fly around at twilight, and that's done to find a mate. And most people have probably already guessed they're on every continent except for Antarctica. Obviously, too cold. There's a lot of stuff that's not found in Antarctica. So the common name firefly is just a kind of a generic, and as I mentioned, they're kind of split into three groups. You saw that the genuses, but they also will kind of group them based on their courtship behavior. So even bugs are out looking for love and have different ways of going about finding it. So the most famous are going to be the flashing fireflies. Those are the ones that we're probably most familiar with that we see in May and June here out in our backyard. And they're going to be flying through the woods or the grass, lightly, flashing, but easy to catch, not moving very fast. And then you're going to have your glowworm fireflies. So if you think about glowworms in the caverns in like New Zealand and some other places, those are going to be another category, or the glowworms. They're active during dusk and nighttime when they're going to lightly glow like that, and they use that glowing to communicate. So the males look like regular fireflies, um, but the females, and you can see there, there's a picture of one, they look more like the larva. And they can't fly because they're really large, actually, as compared to some sexual dimorphism. They don't have wings necessarily, so they're going to crawl everywhere, or they're going to crawl up the stems, that kind of thing. Some live in caves like this, but there are an awful lot of species out there that don't live in caves and just live in the garden, in the woods, that kind of thing. And then there's daytime dark fireflies. And I can remember as a kid getting a firefly and getting excited because we all know they have that kind of orangey red head, and then there's that big black spot in the middle, and then black wings. I would find some and they wouldn't have a glowing rear end, and I'd be confused because I thought all fireflies did. Nope. These are daytime darks, and they're going to be mostly active during the day. And they use chemical pheromones to attract their mate, not the flashing, the bioluminescence that their cousins do. Um, they also have a stage as a larval stage that glows. So these are all going to have some stage of their development where they glow, but not all the same. All right, so life cycle and adults and eggs. So, as I mentioned, they're part of Coleoptera or beetles, and they're going to go through what's called complete metamorphosis. So, complete metamorphosis means that they're not going to have just a nymph stage, so like where they're a mini adult. They're going to have four life stages. So eggs, larva, pupae, and adult. And you can see that up there in their life cycle. Whereas if you had an incomplete, it would only have the three life stages: egg, nymph, and adult. And that nymph would be a mini version of the adult and would just get larger, like squash bugs. That's, one example of something that has an incomplete. So the adult fireflies, they're only going to live a couple weeks in the summer. you'll have multiple generations, but each individual generation is only going to be a couple weeks. So that brief window from May through June, where you're seeing all of those fireflies outside, relish it because that's like their complete life cycle. Where uh, other insects are happily doing their thing all summer long. We only have a brief window to really enjoy these guys. So as they emerge and become sexually mature, they're going to mate almost immediately. So they emerge, they pupate, they emerge, and then they are out there looking for love. So you'll see them in big bursts of in their generations. And each firefly female is going to lay somewhere about 500 eggs. So that's an awful lot of eggs. And most of them are going to lay them on the ground. There are some that are semi-aquatic or aquatic, but generally speaking, most are going to lay them on the surface or just below ground. Although some, like I said, will lay on aquatic plants or in the water. Um, and that at that point we would consider them an aquatic invertebrate. And there are actually a lot of insects that do have a stage where their larvae live in the water. Dragonflies, stoneflies, there's a lot of them. Black flies, there's a lot of them out there that do. So their diets can vary. Some are predatory, meaning they're going to eat other insects. They're going to eat snails. They're going to eat slugs. I mean, that seems a bit weird considering the adult is kind of innocuous. It's floating around, it's glowing. But yeah, the larval stage of this species can be very predatory. Some are going to feed only on plant pollen and nectar. They're pollinators. And so, as you know, some beetles are very clumsy about how they're pollinators. Some fireflies are very, focused on it. That's their food. And then some don't eat at all. Certain stages, like the European glowworm, they're going to mate, they're going to lay their eggs, and then they die. And there are a lot of insects that do that. So firefly eggs can glow. I thought that was a bit interesting. But yes, so if you are out and about and you notice some weird little glowing uh, spheres, that's probably firefly eggs. Who knew? And all of them, give or take, are going to take about 3 weeks to hatch, and that's somewhat dependent on temperature. So very similar for every other insect that's out there. If they're a later generation, let's say you live up in, the upper Midwest or New York or something like that, and you have very, very short summer season, the last generation might hibernate. Those firefly larvae might hibernate all winter long during the cold months, and they'll burrow underneath the ground. They may live there. They may hide in rotting wood or leaf litter or under bark. And though I'll touch on this later, this is the main reason why we've seen such a reduction in populations of these guys because HOAs and other things, destruction, building, new subdivisions, lots of that. When you eliminate all of their habitat, they don't have any place to live. Now, not saying that they can't come back, and with help from humans they can, but that's a main reason why we live in, I'll just call it a firefly desert, because a lot of us are actually taking away their habitat. So larvae they're going to be specialized predators. I mentioned before they'll munch on all sorts of stuff, including slugs, snails, and worms. And it's kind of scary because they'll inject their prey with digestive chemicals. So they're similar to like what a fly will do. A fly will land on some kind of food and it will regurgitate digestive enzymes and then it sucks them all back up again. Well, these guys are going to do the same. They're just going to inject that, which is somehow even more terrifying. But they're good. We're just going to overlook the fact that it's a little, you know, a little creepy. Um, but those larvae, after they feed and get their strength, and they're going to go undergo a metamorphosis, and it's going to be about 2 weeks, and then they're going to emerge in late spring. So I'm talking here North America. I'm not really going to delve into firefly species in Europe or South America or any of those. Remember, they tend to be more temperate, a few tropical, but generally it's going to be fairly temperate. So um, this kind of gives you an idea of the different life cycles and how they go about it for each of these groups. So remember, you have the flashing fireflies, and those are going to be the ones like you have in your backyard. You have your daytime dark, which tend to be more active in the daytime, hence the name. And then you have your glowworms, which you have the male, which generally doesn't glow at all, and the female, which is rather large and elongate and glows. Um, so you're going to find that they all have bioluminescence somewhere in their life cycle, but not all adults will have those. So without getting too far into the weeds on this, yes, pun intended, you can see here how their life cycle progresses depending on which type you have. Again, I'm happy to share my slides. So you'll see my info on the last slide. You can reach out and I will be happy to share my slide deck if you want this information. So this is a little bit more. You can see there's so much variation and difference in how the firefly looks. So on the top, if you were looking down on a firefly, you'll note a lot of them look the same. They all have the black with kind of outlined yellowish elytra. That's the hard casing on the back side like a beetle has, because it is a beetle. And you'll have the head, which has kind of a reddish spot, or the whole thing is going to be red with that black dot. Very characteristic of a firefly. But when you flip it over and you look at the abdomen, the part that glows, you'll note it's very different depending on the species that it is. So you can see those are the light organs there up in the top right corner, depending on the species of the firefly. And then you can see a close-up of that, the light organs. And then we'll go a little bit more into the bioluminescence of it, but this infographic kind of gives a really nice, roundup of all the facts. So if you wanted to see how that goes. So first, as far as energy efficiency, you can see there about 95% light and about 5% heat is emitted from their chemical reaction, whereas like 10% light and 90% heat for an incandescent bulb, which is that's pretty efficient. So we need to like ask uh, the scientists why they're not mimicking this. Maybe it's a glow stick, I don't know, but I would think you would want to mimic something that's so efficient, right? You're harnessing all the light. But you can see the photocell down there, and we'll talk about the two different chemicals in a second. But you can see how the anatomy works into that and the light organ and how that all works together, which is pretty cool. Science is really cool. So firefly bioluminescence. So it's going to require luciferin, which is one of those chemicals, those light emitting chemicals. Oxygen, magnesium, ATP, which is for energy. Humans will have that also. Luciferase, which is an enzyme, and that's going to release photons for that burst of light. So you're going to get a combination of that luciferin and oxygen, magnesium, energy, and the luciferase, which will produce that light. And don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz after this. So fireflies can stop or start that glow at any time. They have 100% control over that chemical reaction, which is really cool, right? Um, and it's under their nervous center control. So, I mean, it's rudimentary because they're an insect, of course, but that's still really impressive that they have the ability to start it and stop it in whatever pattern they need or want based on, complete control over that. Did you know that the light emitted from these guys can be not just that greenish yellow color, like that's what we typically see out in our backyard here, but it can be yellow, can be a greenish color. You can have a light reddish color. You can even have an orange color. That's going to be found probably more in the glowworms. But yeah, I mean, you get all those different colors. And a lot of the ones that we have, very lucky to live here in the South because we have quite a few up in the Smokies that are just fantastic. So you can get the blue ghost fireflies up in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And I'll give some other suggestions where you can go to see some other really neat ones. But from a distance, they seem to glow blue. But up close, it's more of a greenish color. And you can see the upper picture there, the top picture is a shot of the blue ghost fireflies. And all fireflies can or will produce some light as larvae. Remember, not every adult will, but the larva will. Um, and the fireflies in the western U.S. only really glow during their larval stage. So differences between the west and the eastern part of the U.S. So, a lot of people think, well, if these genes are so cool, what are we of these fireflies, what are we using for? Well, we are, and they've been introduced genetically into mice and for scientific experiments for to track genes and gene editing, silkworms, potatoes, not sure on why the potatoes. But it's a way that they can tag these cells and see if these reactions and scientific experiments that they're doing are actually working. It's a way to track them. So it's a very valuable asset to have in our hands for scientific experiments. So here's a few more things that they're being used for. So assays, bioassays, bioluminescent imaging for like tumor growth and stuff. They can track that. Use it for DNA extraction, drug screening, and you can initially, and I'll get to this, bioluminescent plants. So in the earlier days, they actually were trying gene editing to see if they could get the luciferase into the plant tissues. Pollution detection kits and the glow in the dark science kit. So if you get one of those for your kids or your grandkids, that might be using some of that firefly technology. And then art, of course, because who wouldn't want to have some glowing art? That's all, these are all things that fireflies have contributed to. So this is the one where I know a lot of people are like, I bet you I know uh, where they got that technology. Firefly petunias, which you would think because they call them firefly petunias, have been a really big thing these last couple of years. They sell out pretty much everywhere they are being sold. And most people are probably thinking, well, hey, they're calling it a firefly petunia. Surely that technology has come from fireflies, right? No, no, it's actually not. For whatever reason, it was found to be easier to use genes from bioluminescent mushrooms and a different type of fungus instead of the firefly, probably because they're closer. I don't know. Anyway, the glow is continuous. It's going to absorb that sunlight. It's a little bit different than what fireflies do, and how that. Chemical reaction happens, which is probably why they don't use that anymore. They found it easier to get that consistent glow by just having it absorb light and emit it later versus an actual chemical reaction to get it. So no, firefly petunias are not from fireflies. And then here's a few other suggestions on bioluminescent organisms. And I did do a webinar on bioluminescence in plants and animals that if you are curious and you want know a little bit more about it, you can check out that QR code. Don't stress. This will actually get posted also, and it's on that page, so you can find it. But if you don't want this, you can always catch it there. But it's interesting because there's a lot of stuff out there that does use bioluminescence, and who wouldn't want to know that, right? All right, so why do they flash? Well, the obvious answer is they're looking for love. Um, so most male fireflies are going to use a very specific pattern of flashing, and they're doing that because they want to attract the females. And the female of the genus Photinus is going to respond with a very specific pattern also that is, I see you, I have seen you, which is pretty neat because they're insects, right? It's not just a pheromone, which that can be emitted, but it's like, hey, I'm looking for you, baby, and oh, I see you. I've seen you. So they're communicating, which is really neat. As I mentioned before, some species are going to use pheromones in addition to light, and some just use pheromones to attract, and that's how a lot of insects do with pheromones. So light patterns can change. I had mentioned they have complete control over that. So that can help warn predators for a bad taste. That's kind of another benefit that we see that fireflies use. So the lucibufagin, chemical lucibufagin, that has a really bad taste. So if you ever, now I'm sure I killed a lot of fireflies. I'm sorry about that, but I'd put them as a necklace, and then maybe I licked my finger, I don't know, at a popsicle, and I'm like, ew, that's really nasty. That is that chemical. That's why it's very bitter. So birds. Other insects that might want to eat it, frogs, that kind of stuff, they're going to taste that bitterness, and that's a warning, don't eat me. There are other insects, of course, in the kingdom out there that do the same thing, but this is what we're talking about fireflies today. So, female fireflies in the genus Photurus, they have a particular glow pattern to attract males, and then they eat them to get those defensive chemicals. So, similar to like a praying mantis will lure the male in, she'll mate with him, and then she'll eat him. Uh, so too will this female firefly. She will eat the male, and then she will use his defensive chemicals to bolster her own for protection. So very interesting. This is a video from the Smoky Mountains, and these are synchronous fireflies. So if you watch, hopefully you're not too bright a room, but you can notice that they kind of just they all go off in a chain reaction. And these guys are super cool. If you ever get an opportunity to go and check these out, definitely do it. I've not, it's on my bucket list. There are other places up and down the Blue Ridge Parkway where you can see them. You don't need to just go to the one spot in the Smokies, but this is a really neat thing, and definitely if you didn't know about it, you should go check it out. So the synchronization is using visual cues. So they're actually timing themselves based on the neighbors. That's why when you see one go off, they all go off in like a chain reaction. But it's unusual to see that. So, that's why this is something that's pretty special. And here's some locations that you can find them. So you've got the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And if you want to get put into the lottery, too late for this season, but you can shoot for 2026, that QR code will take you there. It's a lottery, so you have to put your name in, and if they draw your name, then they bus you into an area, and then you can watch. But there are other locations where you can see them as well. So Conagry National Park in South Carolina, Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, Rocky Ford State Park in Tennessee. And then there are other synchronous fireflies, not this particular species, but if you go over into Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, and parts of South America, there are some. India, May to June, here's the approximate time periods in Japan, and even in Mexico. So there are synchronous fireflies, other parts of the world. You could always make your bucket list with a couple check marks next to it and check out some different ones. All right, so let's move into where they are and the later, how are we going to save them kind of thing. So North American firefly populations here, you can kind of see from the Xerces Society, which has a really great site with a lot of good information. You can see endemic species, and the south and through the east and northeast of North America is pretty heavy on species. There are some out west, but you can see they definitely don't like arid or cold, high elevation. They are definitely more temperate and warm temperate, and even into tropical, not fully tropical like Thailand. There are some there, but you can see the species richness and how many there are based on the coloration. And so you can see the southeast is pretty rich in species. A lot of that is going to be in the mountains, folks. Very temperate, very lush. A lot of times it's a temperate rainforest. So that's a good thing for them. And then conversely, you can see the number of threatened species by state or province, which is sad. Um, so, we'll talk a little bit about what you can do. So fireflies in Georgia. So we do have 10 here in Georgia. Some you'll see a lot of, some you won't see as many of. This actually comes off of a UGA website. They have, and I'll have a QR code with that in a second, but you can see all of this good information. There's actually some curriculum in there. So if you're a homeschooler or maybe you're a teacher and you're looking for additional curriculum to teach, there is curriculum on that website and free for use. Um, so firefly habitat, what they like. So they're going to prefer warm temperatures, as I mentioned, temperate to tropical, wetlands, moist soil and litter, lots of leaf litter. They're going to want to be near standing water because remember, a lot of the species I mentioned have an aquatic larval stage, and so they need to be near standing water. So wetlands or maybe a stream or a lake or a pond or something like that. Areas with tall grasses, vegetation, shrubs, and other places like that to shelter. And abundant flowers, preferably native for those that eat pollen and nectar. But, nativars are okay also. And then areas with minimal light pollution. So, we need to add that in there. These guys are attracted to each other by light, by bioluminescence. So if you turn your porch light on, that can cause some issues. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So let's dive into the bad. Why are they decreasing? And I already talked about this a little bit. So habitat degradation. When you come in and you clear an old farmland, pastures and hedgerows and trees, forested areas to put tract homes, where does all that vegetation that they use go? It gets removed. So you're wiping out all the insect populations that were there, bad and good. So all those are gone. They're gone. And then you come back with just, sod, maybe a few barren landscape plants. And unless you come in and really alter that and then allow the leaf litter to stay, allow the nursery locations for these insects to stay, and encourage others to do it, they're not going to be there. So, we try to educate folks when they call and they say, I don't see any butterflies anymore. I don't see any fireflies anymore. I miss those from when I was a kid. Well, you have to educate folks that you've got to leave the habitat for these particular insects. So you need to leave some leaves around the trees in the backyard. You need to leave some places for them to overwinter and shelter. You need to leave some leaves for them to have as a nursery area. Um, so firefly larvae, a lot of them thrive in rotting wood and the forest litters and near a wet area. So consider a water feature if you can in your backyard. Um, Even if you live in a condo area, you can have small water features. You can have container gardens. I mean, you would be shocked at what kind of little ecosystems you can get in just a small container garden with a small water feature on a balcony. You would really be shocked. Not just mosquito larvae. Sometimes you'll get other stuff. Light pollution. So that's going to be buildings, cars, streetlights. All of that is going to disrupt that bioluminescent signal that male is given to that female. It confuses them. So the same way they tell you for migrating birds, waterfowl, turn your porch lights off during migration season. Same thing if you lived on the beach and they tell you turn the porch lights off. During turtle season, same thing here. It disrupts that communication. So try in late May to June if you've got a fairly naturalized backyard and you have seen some, turn your porch lights off. You don't need them necessarily. So let the bugs do their thing. Help them where you can. Pesticides. So we usually try to sell integrated pest management or IPM. That is, we don't say you can't or shouldn't use pesticides, but we want you to be very mindful of how you do it. So you're going to use, other methods first that aren't as degrading to the environment, don't hurt the environment, and you're going to try to control those pests through those. Mechanical or biological or all of that, all the way up through organic and then finally synthetic pesticides if you need to. But that also helps the beneficials like these guys. Poor water quality. If you live in a pond near a pond, or you live near a river, or you live near a wetland area, poor water quality kills a lot of aquatic insects. So if you're familiar with water quality in general and how do you gauge how healthy a body of water is, whether it be a lake or stream or a river, well, there are benthic macroinvertebrate indices where people will go out and collect. Adopt a Stream is a very well-known program. If you're interested in that, reach out to me. I can get you in contact with folks that can get you trained so that you're comfortable doing that. But you go out and you sample these macroinvertebrates that are living in the water, and based on what you see, species wise, numbers, that kind of thing, we can tell how degraded a body of water is. And so if we need to be, mindful of that, and we need to realize, oh no, something's going on upstream. We got to figure out what's going on and stop that. It gives us kind of an early intervention before we lose the population. So, watching out for water quality, and that includes sediment also. So if you're seeing a lot of mud and stuff come down a stream where you live, there's likely some rule breaking going on upstream. So definitely jump in. And if you don't know what to do, you can always reach out to me and I will tell you what you need to do, the steps you need to go through. And of course, invasive species, the ever present problem here in Georgia, competing for food and resources. This is not only plants, but it's also insects and animals. Sometimes you'll have different insects that are using the same breeding sites, or they're going to prey on fireflies. Yeah, all sorts of problems like that. So these are all reasons why they're degrading. So here's some things to look out for. So these are going to be firefly species at risk. You don't need to, I'm not going to read all of them out, but you can see there I've got the state that they're located in the United States. What it looks like, if there's a picture available, this is all off the Xerces Society, as I mentioned. If you Google that and Firefly, the Xerces Society and Firefly, you'll get a wealth of information. But you can see all the different types of fireflies that are at risk or endangered. And a lot of these you'll note East Coast or in the Southeast. That's where most of them are, although there are a few that are in Arizona and some of the more dry states. But the higher populations and diversity is in the Southeast and the Eastern Seaboard. All right, so how do you save these little guys? I've already talked about most of these ideas, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. So here you want to decrease light pollution at night. This is a really interesting website, darksitefinder.com, and it will show you your state, and you can move around and you can look at other states and you can zoom in and you can look for dark sky areas. So I put here Lawrenceville, that's where my office is located, and you can see we're right on the outer edge of Atlanta. Atlanta is about as bright as you can get. So gray being very bright. And you can see large parts of the Atlanta area up into like Beaufort and Sugar Hill. That's where the Mall of Georgia is. There's a lot of light, a lot. And that's very unfortunate, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have fireflies if you're in that area. But to decrease light pollution, you can help turn off your exterior lights, as I mentioned, or just have them on motion detection so they're not on all the time. Draw your blinds or your curtains at night so that your light stays in the house. And just try to be mindful of that. I mean, if you want to turn your little Edison bulbs, those hanging bulbs that kind of go around a deck, on for a little while you're enjoying the deck at night, that's fine. I mean, that's not, I don't want to tell you don't do these things because the bugs are more important. I'm not that kind of person. But just be mindful. You don't need to turn your floodlights on all night long. Your neighbors probably don't like that either. And I've gotten complaints and I can't do anything. You really need to reach out to your neighbor if that's a problem. But yeah, just be mindful. Use some common sense. It shouldn't be a lost cause. But if you're curious, you can always go down to the Sky Finder and check it out. Um, just as an aside, I do also have a piece of property up in Rabun County, which if you go up to the Georgia border, you can see the real dark spot there where it's kind of black. It's actually right in there. And there I can actually see all of the satellites. I can see the shooting stars. I can see galaxies and other. I mean, it's really cool. And it does make a big difference. So I know one person can't make a difference, but you know, spread the word. So pesticide risk, as I mentioned, integrated pest management. Very important. Just across the board in general, it's not healthy to rely overly on pesticides. It's not good for us or our health, and it's not good for the environment. A lot of these pesticides are bad for insects. They'll kill the good ones as well as the bad ones. So if you can be smart and knowledgeable and do the things that you need to do, like squish the bug eggs or vacuum up the nymphs, versus waiting and then spraying with some type of pesticide that kills all sorts of things, that's the more responsible way. So again, common sense. And just as a mention, here's some reasons like how it works. So the risks, sublethal exposure of pesticides. So those bugs may not go through complete development. Sometimes there's growth regulators that are in there. There's a lot of insecticides that include those. So it may make so that that poor little firefly larva can't actually go through the metamorphosis process and pupate into an adult. So you may be inadvertently hampering them by spraying something else around your yard. Pesticide drift, you shouldn't be doing that at times that they're most active. I know they say for pollinators, which are mostly active during the day, don't spray insecticides, and they usually say spray them right at the end of day into evening. It's, you know, these guys are active. Um, the best time to do it early morning. So before your pollinators get really busy, if you have to go out and spray something, do it early morning. So after these guys are all done out there with their displays at that particular time period, so May to June, do it in the morning, but before the pollinators start getting busy. And then you don't have to worry about drift as much. Also, if you're watching weather patterns. Water contamination, again, you shouldn't be spraying any of that stuff around water anyway, because you can affect waterways and all of that. You know, I'm preaching about being careful not only with sediment, erosion control and all of that, nutrient pollution like fertilizers and things, but also your pesticides. You don't want that flowing into your waterways either. So you need to be mindful of those. And like here's some, quick things that you can do. You insect repelling companion plants. So I've got presentations on those too, and you can find those on that YouTube channel, which I'll show you the QR code for at the end. Again, use an IPM as an approach, and use mosquito larvicides. Don't spray for them. I know I hear them on the radio saying that they can control mosquitoes, and they do typically use BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, as a method, a larvicide. It's a bacterium that those mosquito larvae, it's put right in the water. They consume it, and it basically, kills them from the inside out, for lack of a better way of explaining that. It's very safe. Your cat or your dog can drink the water. It's not going to do anything to them. That's the best way to do it, or just dump the water so that they don't have a place to reproduce. But if you have something like a bird bath or you have something like a fish pond with no fish in it, that's the best option. a natural, organic way of doing it that's not going to be as dangerous. And if you want to learn a little bit more about integrated pest management, UGA has a good publication over there. And then the YouTube video that I mentioned, Green Partnerships Unlocking Secrets to Companion Planting, that video, there's a QR code directly to that video. But if you end up over at that YouTube channel to check other stuff out, and this, if you want to watch it again, or maybe you missed the first half and you want to catch that, it'll all be on that YouTube channel. And that's BT. That would be your friend. So planting, how do you save them? What can you do? I told you what not to do. What can you do? Well, you can plant native trees that are going to provide a canopy, so those fireflies can start their light show earlier. It's kind of when it starts to get dark, they have their own little natural photocell. They are going to show up when it's darker. So if you have a nice canopy of trees, like my backyard is very heavily wooded, and I tend to get tons of fireflies. Now, I don't use a lot of pesticides or anything, and because I have all trees, I don't cut the grass. There's no grass, it's just understory. And they live in that leaf litter and they are happy. And I have tons of fireflies every single year. And it's great. And I enjoy sitting there on my porch and watching them because it just makes me happy. So if you plant more trees and you allow more of that leaf litter, and it's darker, they will come. They will find it. They will reproduce. So keep those decaying logs. So if you have a tree that falls over, go ahead and section it if you want to. Your termites are going to break it down eventually, but those fireflies will use that leaf litter and that decaying wood material. They'll hide in there. And so that's perfect for them to overwinter. And you'll get some other bugs that do there too. It's none of the bad ones really live there. Some other things you can do, rake some of those leaves into a pile. So instead of getting the bags from Home Depot or Lowe's and bagging all your leaves up and putting them on the edge of the curb there for the city or the county to haul off, keep some of those. Not only is it going to turn into valuable compost and add back to the mulch area that you're raking it off of to put pine straw on, but it's going to be beneficial, and those fireflies are going to like that better than they would if it was just pine straw. Don't use a leaf blower if you can help it to move those leaves around. That's going to destroy larvae. Now, if it's your driveway, that's fine. But some people will blow all those leaves, and I get it. At the end of the summertime, maybe during leaf drop, blow them into the woods and then just leave them. But don't go out there disrupting what's already been laying on the ground for most of the summer. Adult fireflies are pollinators, as I've mentioned, so make sure you've got lots of pollinating flowers for them. That will help attract them as well as other insects that are pollinators. So it's a beneficial, it's an oasis in a wasteland. And encourage your neighbors to do the same. And if you live in a high rise, it's okay. You can still have container gardens. I talk about that all the time. Have a balcony that has tons of pots on there. You'd be shocked at what little ecosystems you can have just in that very small area. And create water features. So you may not have a running stream nearby, you may not have a pond nearby, but you can create a little pond in your backyard. I mean, you can have a little pot that's a pond. I mean, you can buy just plug it in. It's a little fountain and it's got a little pot. And so not only are you going to make the birds happy by giving them a water source, but the bugs will be happy too. So provide habitat, mow that grass a little less often, figure out what the minimum is for HOA so you don't get the nasty grams, and keep it at a little taller. That's more beneficial during dry times like we're in right now anyway. So you don't want to scalp it. You don't want it at 2.5 inches. That's a golf course. You're not at a golf course. It's okay to have it a little bit longer, and it's better for the environment. These guys are going to rest in that tall grass during the day. And maybe you have an area out in your backyard that's a little rougher than, maybe you're not cutting it as often, but that's beneficial for the bugs. Avoid over cleaning. So natural debris, your leaves and your other stuff, it's very important. So have a natural area out in the back somewhere where nobody's going to complain about it. You'll get that natural habitat they need, and maybe you'll see more fireflies the next year. Start a compost pile. Not only is that going to be good for your garden, because you'll have all that good compost you can add back, but they're decomposers. So they're not only are they going to be in there anyway, but then all those slugs and snails and stuff like that, those larvae can eat them. So you've got a little soil ecosystem going on there, a little place where you're attracting more of them. And they're going to thrive in natives. So I I like natives and I appreciate natives. I like nativars as well, which is a fancy way of saying a native plant, and they've jiggered with it a little bit to make it a little bit, make it pop a little bit more, maybe a better color or something like that. And then there's other introduced species, and I'm not against those at all. Plant all of them. Some things that aren't native have really pretty colors. Just remember that most of the ecosystem that's here, that has been here, needs those natives in order to thrive. So have a good mix of everything. It's not going to hurt and it will help. Um, I'm not, again, I don't subscribe to the everything needs to be native because I think there's a lot of pretty stuff out there and good stuff that I don't want to let drift by because it's not a native. But I do have a lot of natives on my property as well. Yeah, yeah, the HOA. And this is one of the rather large glowworms. As you can see, this is a female. She's kind of creepy looking. She's huge, but you can see that she glows, and completely harmless. Very interesting looking. But yeah, so that's a big one. Very cool. All right, so let's look at gardens. We're kind of in the home stretch here. I'm not going to talk much about each of these because these are just suggested firefly gardens, ways of landscape plans for setting up in your yard that are specifically meant to attract fireflies. Now, they're going to obviously attract other stuff, but and this will take you to those particular pages, this QR code. Again, as I mentioned, um, reach out to me and I am happy to share the slide deck with you. And this is another one, and you can see just interesting layouts here. And another one, and another one. But these are all in a printable document at that website. So how to safely view them. So in case you didn't ever get the chance to go out as a child and live the life of a country kid, or a kid in suburbia where you got to go collect fireflies. You're gonna find yourself a clear jar. You're gonna put a couple of air holes. So if you got an old pickle jar, that works. Put a couple air holes in the top. You can use a nail and a hammer. That's what we did. And then catch a firefly. Put the firefly in there, put that lid on, and look at it for a while and just marvel at that. And maybe you're gonna look at it, you're just gonna set it next to your bed, and you're gonna watch it glow softly at night, and then you're gonna release it. So it's, one of those things where you really have to have an appreciation for it. And if you never got a chance to do that as a child, you really should do it now too. It's okay. You can have that inner child. So this is the Lights Off, Fireflies On page I was talking about with UGA. Becky Griffin is part of this, and there's curriculum here that you can download if you're a homeschooler, if you're a teacher. It's a good website. That's where the landscape plans are. And there's other good information there as well. So I'll have the sources. But these are stops. I believe this is like a little road trip. So you can go, here's the Taman Park and Blue Ridge and the Secret Word. So you can do like a little scavenger hunt if you would be to go check out some of these locations. And then these are your resources. So the Xerxes Society, very good information here on fireflies, worldwide fireflies, not just fireflies. And they're a wealth of information on a lot of other things also. The University of Georgia Extension, Lights on Firefly, or sorry, lights off, Fireflies on, and the dark sky finder for dark sky map. And this is where you can go. You can check out our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. That's where all of these recorded webinars go and they're housed. So you can go check them out at any time. And if you like these classes and you want more of them, you can go check out the other classes that we have coming up for the next 3 months or so at our events and classes. And so they all should be free. If you register here, we try to put them on as many places as we can. Sometimes we'll put links associated with it. So you just click the link and it takes you to the Zoom directly. Sometimes you will find the registration if the Gwinnett system tries to get you to purchase something because you're out of county, you can always reach out to us and we will register you for free because it's free. We're just sharing information. There's no reason why anything we should charge. So if you have questions, you can pop those in the chat box and I will be happy to see what you are saying. But that's basically it for tonight. If you have any questions, so let's see here. Does it matter what color the light is? That is a good question. So generally speaking, a red light is that spectrum of light is supposed to not affect things. People, definitely. I know they say to use a red light. You can still see, but hence the dark room, that kind of stuff. But that is a good question. I am not 100% certain if that red wavelength affects these these insects the same way it does humans. That's a good question. So I will make a note of that and I will actually go look. Generally, we're not going to put a red light on our outdoor lights for some obvious reasons. Sorry, I'm chuckling at that one. Your neighbors might come over and ask you some questions if you have red lights up around your house. But it is a good question. Does anybody have any other questions about fireflies or anything like that? As I mentioned, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to share the slide deck with you so that you can get the resources and learn a little bit more about it, get those landscape plans, and hopefully do a little bit more to save these guys. Because, like I said, they're definitely, I want, my kids are old enough now that, somewhere in the next probably 5 to 10 years, I'll have grandkids. So, not too soon. But yeah, I want them to be able to go out and chase the fireflies. I want that to continue on and on and on. And sometimes when we get a little too suburban or urban, we lose that and we don't appreciate the natural world for what it is. So if we can do things to make it better, hey, we should. That's, my 2 cents for the evening. So if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and call it for the night. And thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And one last check. We'll see you all later. See you at the next one.